Does magic ever really fail? This is an important question that I think everyone needs to examine from time to time. If you ever get into the practices of magic, now some of you may already know, you've been watching me for a long time, that I'm more than just magical practice. For me, magical practice is a form of sort of yoga, if you will. It's a way for me to help align myself, body, mind, and spirit, with something more than just the tangible basics of reality. It's a way to experiment with the delusion of Maya. I am someone who brings a very non-dualistic perspective to the magical arts. It is where I hang my hat. It is what I'm mostly famous for. Almost every magical tradition talks about non-dualism in some way. Most of the esoteric systems begin with the premise that all is one, or something like that. All is mind, or if you're a monotheist, you have the pantheistic view that all is under one God or is part of one God. For example, if you're a rabbi or if you're practicing Kabbalah, you are supposed to understand that all is an emanation of God in some sense, right? So most metaphysical esoteric traditions are based, not all, in the non-dual perspective, on some level, in some capacity, or something similar to that concept. Now, from that perspective, we understand that we are more than this. We understand that we are the eye behind the eye. We are the all-seeing eye. And the all-seeing eye is not really fallible, not because things that we don't discern as mistakes don't happen, but because those things that we discern as mistakes and failures are illusory, in that they aren't actually mistakes and failures. They're actually part of the process of mutual arising of the events and circumstances that we call the delusion of life, the Maya, the dream. Now, when practicing magic, there is the misconception that magic is a mechanical system of ways that you get what you want out of life, that it's just another hand that you can use to manipulate reality with. And while there is some truth in that, in the sense that it can be analogous in many ways to a hand, unlike a hand, it is not entirely or really under the control of your ego. I would even argue that your ego is under control of nothing. Your ego really controls nothing at all. It thinks it's in control. It's the part of you that when experience happens, it says, I did that. That's ego, okay, in the magical sense, in the metaphysical sense, not necessarily in the traditional psychiatric sense, mind you. So the ego in the metaphysical sense is the part that takes credit. It is the, as I've said, the jester that sits on the throne of the heart chakra and pretends it's the king. It wears the king's crown, it wears the king's robes, and it says, look what I've done, look at this beautiful world I've created. Well, whenever you're practicing magic, part of that process is sort of integrating and aligning the ego with what we call higher intention, or true intention, okay? Now, true intention is something that is easy to say, but is perhaps infinitely difficult to pin down and explain, because infinite true intention, the true origin of intention, cannot be found in the thoughts, because your thoughts are actually not even just a product of your intention. To put it one way, if I were to ask you to think of something, you would think of something. And I said, where did that thought come from? If you're being honest, you're going to say something along the lines of either because you told me to think of that, or I was reminded of something. Every thought you've ever had sort of comes out of its own space, and then we relate it to something that we think happened before. So you can't sit there and say, well, I'm going to do this love spell because I've decided to do a love spell. Because the very act of deciding to do that love spell is contingent upon something that came before it. This, of course, brings us into the question of free will. Do you have free will? This is all very important to understand when discussing success and failure in magic, because you have to understand the paradigm in which success and failure happens before you can really understand, do you ever actually fail when you do magic? The concept of free will I've often addressed as a silly question, because when we ask the question, do I have free will, or when we make the statement, I have free will, my first response, my intuitive response is to say, what is your will exactly free from? What exactly is your will independent of? If you are a non-dualist, the idea of your will being completely independent of yourself is absurd. Your will is a part of what you are. But the thing that you think of as free will, the ability to think, act, speak in a way that is what you perceive as something self-originating, something that has no direct cause from outside the self, is pretty much entirely illusory. I can't think of a single instance of a thought or an action that I've ever had, if I'm being honest, that just came out of nowhere. And from a materialist sense, now you can say, oh, well, you've had random ideas pop in your head. True. But are they truly random? Especially if those ideas are made up of ideas that I've already had. For example, if I randomly think of a red fire truck, I've used this example before, the red fire truck itself is a product of a prior experience. I could not have that random thought of a red fire truck without the prior experience and thought of a red fire truck. Even if I want to say that I can creatively combine ideas, the impetus for that creation comes from something else. So the question really is, does the ego have free will? Because that is the part of us that thinks it has free will. The true self is independent. It transcends the concept of free will because everything that is done by the self. In other words, you don't need free will because there's nothing else for you to be free from. You are everything that's happening. I'm that candle burning. Now I can, as an ego, say my ego is independent from that candle because my ego is just an idea. So I can say, oh, my ego is independent of that candle and I can interact with that candle and I can control it actually. I can put it out, or if I do it wrong, it can burn me. And so there's that element of free will. I have a choice in how to interact with that candle. But that's the illusion of my ego. That's the illusion my ego has. My ego is an illusion. It's an egregore. It's a created tulpa. It's a thought form that thinks it's real, because that's really the point. It wants to have an identified experience, the it being the true you, your higher self, your true self. So your intention follows not from your ego. Your ego is actually at the mercy of your true intention. You may not realize this. If you are still seated on the throne of ego, if you think that you are the jester sitting upon the heart chakra throne, if you think that that's what you are, then you don't realize that you're not making a single decision for yourself. You're a puppet on strings. If you pull yourself back and you start to recognize, oh, I'm a puppet on strings, you realize, well, wait a minute, no, I'm not. I'm the strings pulling the puppet. Aha, see, I have free will. Then I'm going to ask, well, follow those strings all the way up. What are you going to find? And so long as you keep looking, you will keep finding a new hand higher and higher puppeting you. You'll find a cascade of puppets, one after the other, each one with their own little puppet string act going on that you're at the end of. Forever and ever and always. So what are you? What's doing the intention? It's a nameless thing. It is awareness itself. It is the consciousness itself. It is that aware property that is vibrating with this experience. And it is vibrating this experience in a very, we'll say, I don't want to say random, not random. Randomness would imply that there is nothing to what we're doing. Rather, the experiences we have are part of a greater whole, a block-time reality, a reality in which all things happen. Past, present, future, all have happened, they are happening. In fact, let's get rid of the word happen. Let's just call it a happening. Everything is a constant happening. And our consciousness moves through this reality like a needle on a record. I've said this many times, like a broken record. What we do is an illusion. What we think is an illusion. What we experience is an illusion. But it is an illusion that we as consciousness have chosen. So consciousness does not cause, it does not affect. There is no cause and effect truly. Cause and effect is part of the illusion, but it's a necessary part, just like time, just like space and distance. It's a real experience, but it is not a real thing. Just like gravity is a real experience, but gravity itself is not a force. Look it up. There is no force of gravity. That's a misnomer. They shouldn't say that. Just like gravity is not a force, time is not a force, space is not a force. Forces are not even probably forces when we really get to the source. Time does not move. Time is a constant. It is a spatial dimension through which consciousness moves. And that movement causes the experience of time. Otherwise, everything would happen all at once. So consciousness simplifies itself down and moves through reality. Now, with this model in our heads, now that I've stated this model for the billionth time, some of you probably tuned out already, can you actually fail at magic? Recently, I did a working with Belial, however you want to say his name. And I did a working with Belial because there was a very important, we'll say, national event going on. And I wanted to have a certain outcome. And this was a very, 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 very difficult undertaking because the forces at work are immense. There's a lot of different minds. There's a lot of different magicians. There's a lot of different forces at work that all have their own intention on experiencing what they want. And that is one excuse I would have for saying that I didn't get the result that I wanted. And so I could say, Belial wasn't up to the task. My magic failed. Belial, you failed me. And that is exactly what I felt for a while. It's exactly where I was. I said to myself, Belial, you failed me. And you put me through the ringer. It was absolute hell. And then as I thought that, the meme of, but did you die, come to my mind. So I recently began interacting with my spirits again. It was nice. Last night was the first time I really sort of went into any kind of vivid interaction with them. It was brief, but it was there. And it was nice to make contact even briefly with them. And Belial was very clear. Belial being an extension, an extrapolation of the source that I am as well. Belial being a mask for the same truth that I am. I am just another mask for that truth, the D.H. Thorne. I'm just another mask for that truth. And Belial said to me very clearly that it was a very important lesson that I had to learn. Getting what you want as an ego is not the point of magic. It never has been. Some people have said to me, well, Thorne, you sound more like a self-help guru than a magician. And I'm going to say to you that if you think there's a difference, you're nuts. Don't you do magic to help yourself? If you are a thaumaturgist who simply tries to cause miracles all over the place, is that not to help yourself? And if it is only to benefit you financially or to give you the handful of experiences that you want to have, are you really growing as a person? Is it really a purposeful practice, or is it just a waste of time? Are you not simply masturbating with magic? Even masturbation has a higher purpose if you understand it. Everything is a self-help guru if you know where to look. And to do magic with the idea that you can succeed or fail means you do not understand the true nature of who you are. The events that I wanted to experience and that I did magic for, and the events that I did not get to have, was not a failure of magic. It was not even a failure of my technique. It was not a failure of my intention. The failure was in my perception, in my understanding, in my ability for a moment to let go of ego. Because it was a very vain and egoistic desire that I had. It wasn't a true intention. If I was being sincere, I might have understood what my true intention was, and I would have simply went with the flow that was happening. Instead, I wanted to change it and make it something else. To the point of desperation. To the point of losing confidence even for a time in my ability. Yeah, that's the danger of failure. But failure does not happen. Failure is a perception. Now I look at myself and I realize that I still have a lot of growth to do in that one area in particular. There's still a very deep, entrenched shadow, which I thought I dealt with. I hadn't. This, of course, goes back to the Shadowgate project, which was very popular with some people and actually got me a lot of flack with a few others. The Shadowgate project, for those of you who know what it's about, looking at the world that happened after those gates were open, no one can deny that those gates had a world-altering effect, and everybody was confronted. And it's still not normalized in that sense. It's still, this shadow merging, the shadow integration still going on. And a lot of people are now retreating back into their little bubbles of denial. But it's still going on. For me, a lot of it had to do with world events and politics that I had never really completely coped with, or I should say I have been coping with, but I've never really dealt with. My ego is still thinking it's the king, at least long enough in the day that it can bring me that kind of displacement. I got into magic with less of that displacement in mind, and I had success because that displacement hadn't been taking place. I felt zen enough. I felt non-dual enough that it didn't matter. It wasn't about ego. Some people mistakenly thought it was. Maybe it's become more egoistic than it could have been, but even that is something I'm identifying and dealing with. The difficulties that it has put me through, being somewhat shadow banned on YouTube, watching my audience get cut in half despite everything that I've done. People coming to me saying, I didn't even know you were still doing videos. Yes, I've been shadow banned. So these things are blows to that ego. Everything that's a blow to an ego brings you closer to the truth about what you are. This is why it's so necessary and important. This is why taking those blows is so necessary and important. And by taking them, I don't mean you become a doormat. What I'm saying is that you roll with them, you experience them fully, you don't avoid them. When they happen, you embrace them. My magic did not fail. In fact, it succeeded in flying colors. And Belial reminded me of this. He says, but did you die? What did you learn in your desperation to have the results that you sought? You think that being a master and God of the universe means that you snap your fingers and what you want occurs. That is not what God's will is if you are that God. It never has been. Except for when it wants you to have that illusion because it's fun. You need to have the experience of powerfulness. But that also means to have that experience of powerfulness, you have to have powerlessness. So my magic in working with Belial, I chose Belial because Belial is supposedly very good at granting authority, at working out legal matters and things of that nature. And that was pretty much exactly what this was about. Of course, he's also about teaching you very difficult life lessons, about shaking your tower and knocking loose any bricks that are weak. He's excellent for that kind of shadow work. And so by invoking him so strongly in an effort to change world events ended up changing me and making me stronger, making me better. making me able to step away even from the spirit world, because the spirit world you can build a dependence upon the spirit world. Even my anger at not getting what I wanted and saying, I'm not talking to Belial for a while. He failed me. He's not getting his offering. He's laughing. That's been our plan all along, because my true intention was not to get the thing my ego desired. Oh no, that was never the intention. The intention was to have the exact experience that I had. It always was. When I say my intention, I mean my consciousness, the true conscious being that I am, the fully integrated, godlike being said unto itself, using metaphorical terms, because it doesn't actually speak to itself in the way we understand. We speak. It speaks when we speak. But allegorically speaking, it spoke and said, Thorne's going to learn today. That's what this was. And the way that events panned out was both like a nightmare, but it was also a great relief, because there is nothing more liberating than hopelessness. Hopelessness that allows you to just sort of, if you've ever been abused as a child, you know what I'm talking about, where when you hear your parents fighting, or you know that there's trouble coming or whatever, or it's already happened, there's nothing you can do about it, you can't stop it. And so you tend to retreat inward. And that's a very valuable skill that you've learned, so long as it doesn't become a defense mechanism. The ability to go inward and be free inside yourself. Even if your body or your emotions are being pummeled, to be able to be free and experience that, but be free inside that and still think what you want. Still have the presence that you want. That is liberation on a level that physical liberation cannot compare to. Imagine if you could go anywhere at any time, anywhere in the world, do anything. That's pretty liberating. But the liberation within is even bigger. It's much more vast. There's much more potential. Because you realize that the material world is contained within the subjective. And thoughts are just another emanation. You can even free your thoughts and be free from thoughts and be even more liberated. You can liberate yourself in ways you don't even realize. But the first thing you need to do is to recognize, number one, magic doesn't fail. Magic always causes a result. In the Maya dream, the delusion of Maya, it's always going to have some kind of an effect, because that's what you intend to experience. It's that what you experience is not going to necessarily match what you think you want. When I think back on myself and I look at myself now, would I be happier? I'd be about the same. I'd be equally as happy as I am now. Would I have as many concerns? Probably not. Would I be stronger? If you have a need for good times to be strong, you're not very strong. If you're only strong when you succeed, you are not strong. And these are the lessons Belial taught me. Even when you think you have failed, even when you think your magic has failed you, it may have actually answered your truest and greatest wish, the truest intent. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. As some of you may know, I have recently started my new program. It's a video training course, sort of. It's not recorded videos per se. I haven't gone that route just yet. I may do that in the future, but for now, I've created a course setup where you can join me once a week for live video training with a group of others. It's a very affordable class. It's $20 a month. I think that's ridiculously affordable. I'll probably be offering some other classes eventually. Right now it's limited to 22 people. But the other good thing about this is if you can't make the class because of the time it is, you can still catch them because I'm recording them and then uploading them separately. So you can actually watch them and participate that way if you can't be there for all of them. So check it out. It's easily found on my Patreon. It's the Discord group video lessons or something like that, I called it. It's the $20 tier. It will be getting increased at some point in the future. This is a limited time where I'm offering it for $20. Eventually it's going to go up to $30. We'll see if I do like night classes, it might be $40 or $50. For now, it's $20 for this introductory to see if I can keep up with it, if people want to do it. So far it went well. We had 10 people at the very first one, and I will be releasing the first class for free so you guys can see what you're getting into, probably sometime next week, so you guys can see what it's all about. But for now, go to my Patreon and check it out. It's a new service I'm offering, and it's one I'm really proud of. I'm really happy to do it. We'll see how long I do it for, because I don't know if I can go over the same lessons over and over and over again for the rest of my life, but we'll see how that works. And hopefully you guys find it interesting and exciting. Anyway, guys, until next time, this is DH Thorne signing off. Mind the shadows.